Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Better Together webinar. We appreciate you joining us today, no matter where you are in the world, and we hope that you are healthy and well. My name is Julian Lute, and I'm a strategic advisor at Great Place to Work. I'm here to facilitate our time together and pose questions to our leaders on your behalf. Today's conversation is important because we're focusing in on how great companies are navigating these two viruses that we're faced with, COVID-19 and racism 2020. One has been with us for less than a year, the other has been around for more than 400, and we're leveraging our collective energy to tackle each of them both personally and organizationally. So whether this is your first time joining us or you've joined a previous session, we trust that you'll find today's conversation enlightening and engaging as we hear from leaders who are pushing themselves and their organizations forward during these times. A couple of quick housekeeping tips. We value your participation, so we'll be using the question panel to respond to your questions, so please enter them there. The panel is located on the right side of your screen. Our colleagues will field the questions and we'll do our best to cover them during the Q&A. We'll also be recording the session, so we'll send along the deck and recording. I'm honored to introduce the speakers for today's conversation. The bios from this pair make them undeniably two of the top leaders in their field, and they are number one, our world's best in 2019, and at this moment, during this time, there's no other company that should be number one, and you're about to hear why. We're joined by Chuck Robbins, Chairman and CEO, and Fran Katsoudas, Executive Vice President and Chief People Officer of Cisco. They're joined in conversation by Michael Bush, CEO of Great Place to Work. Thank you both for joining us, and without further ado, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Julian. And we're very honored today to have Chuck and Fran join us. A few things just for everybody who's listening, for those of you who haven't been with us before. Part of what we're trying to do here is make sure that we fulfill our mission, which is to help all organizations be a great place to work for all. And next slide, please. We are experiencing two viruses at the same time, and the only way for us to get through it is to work together and to share information so that we are all better. Next slide. One of the things we know in our research is that great companies that have a high trust culture get through a recession faster and more productively and financially stronger than companies who don't. So we've analyzed the recessions of the past. We have great companies like Cisco. We have the data to show when you go into a recession with a high trust culture, you come out and financially outperform those that don't. So part of what we're trying to do in our series is to share information with everyone so you can do the same thing in your organization. Next slide. So this shows why. If you look at a recession and you do measurements of the company before and during and after, there's certain things that great companies do really going into a recession and how they behave and make decisions during recession that improve their financial performance on the other side. Next slide. So this shows it's the employee experience. Companies where people feel like they are a full member of the company, that they are valued as a person and not just an employee. Employees that feel like they're asked for their ideas, leaders care about their ideas, leaders listen to their ideas. And that when management makes a promise, they actually deliver on that. So it's really a matter of walking the talk. When that's present in an organization, those organizations thrive. So we're about to talk to Fran and Chuck today to find out what they're doing, what they've been doing, so that we can all learn from that as we go forward. So, Chuck, if you could take some time just to let people know, if you could take a few minutes to let people know about Cisco. People know about 77,000 employees. People may not know about 170 plus countries where you operate. But if you could let people know about the businesses and services and the impact that Cisco has on the world.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for having us today. We're honored to be here, and it's we have a great partnership, obviously, and appreciate all that you and your team are doing as well. So, look, Cisco is started out as a company that provided routing infrastructure for the internet, and in the 90s was instrumental in actually building out the internet with all of our customers around the world. And since then, we've expanded our portfolio, and we now provide the same technology that continues to power the internet and power cloud providers and AT&T, Verizon mobile networks, etc. And we've also diversified. We're the largest enterprise cybersecurity player. We have obviously this wonderful collaboration technology in WebEx that has tripled during the pandemic. It was the largest platform of its kind in the world in January, and by April, the volumes were tripled on it. So we have a whole collaboration portfolio. We're number one in enterprise voice technologies. And we also have, obviously, all the underlying technology infrastructure for networking and connectivity in the enterprise. So we have been in the midst of a transition over the last few years to more software and subscriptions. And, many people won't know it, but we set out a few years ago and set a target at the end of our fiscal year, which, Michael, ends tomorrow, that we would have 30% of our revenue coming from software, and we're on track to achieve that. So we've made a huge amount of progress on that front over the last few years as well. And we believe deeply in our role in our communities where we operate, and have been very active over the last few years in education and healthcare, dealing with homelessness, those that are less fortunate, and our employees really have rallied around it. So that's a bit of what we do every day.
Well, thank you for that. Well, Chuck and Fran, that we love everybody. So in our Better Together series, we use various technologies when we're communicating. But I must admit today that the visuals are especially crisp. And the sound, it's like you're in the room with me. Matter of fact, I have to touch, that's a screen. It feels like you're just here with me. So, WebEx is working for us today, and just want to give you a shout out there. And in terms of some of the things, that we measure in terms of great companies that are better for people, better for business, and better for the world, over $3 billion in tools and resources that you provided to students, schools, and instructors in 180 countries. Have educated more than 9 million students. 22% of them are women. And your people, through all the stresses and strains, 439,000 volunteer hours in fiscal year 2019, with over 450 million people impacted by your services. So those are the measurements. We're all into the numbers, but obviously Cisco's delivering there. And one of the things that we all read about a little while ago is really hearing from you about a more inclusive future. Can you talk about what that means and your own purpose as a CEO?
Yeah, Michael, it's funny. Back almost a year ago, we had a session with my leadership team, and for years we'd had a mission statement that was effectively, we want to change the way the world lives, works, learns, and plays. And by providing the technology that brought forward the functionality of the internet, or at least the infrastructure required, I feel like we did that, but we felt like we needed something different. And so this was pre-COVID, re-emergence of the social inequality issue and the unfortunate deaths. And so we set out and we came up with our purpose, and we said our purpose is to power an inclusive future for all. And the thing that I think is important about it is it spans both our technology as well as our social responsibility and our community action. And here's what I'll tell you. On the technology side, we work with countries all around the world, with heads of state, to actually build digital strategies in these countries. And almost without exception, there is usually a desire to provide high-speed connectivity into rural villages or rural areas. In fact, the U.S. is no different. We have terribly underserved citizens in certain areas of the country. Some cases it's in rural areas, in some cases it's poor areas of inner cities. which is another issue that we're trying to work on right now. But when we see this connectivity being brought to these rural villages, it gives them the opportunity then to participate in this global economy, gives them opportunity, gives us the ability to deliver virtual health care, deliver education. We have stories of women in India in remote areas who used to, or they made goods and they sold them locally, and then they figured out once they had connectivity, they could actually sell on a broader geographic basis and ship these things. And so it opened up opportunities. So we think that's the inclusive opportunity that our technology can provide. And that is a much broader picture, but that's the big thing. And then on the corporate social responsibility side, you mentioned the numbers on the network academies. This year, we'll have 3 million students go through some aspect of that program this year alone. So it's just ramping tremendously, which gives them opportunity. Work in areas like homelessness in Silicon Valley to try to help there. In the midst of the pandemic, the first pillar of our 4-pillar response was the most vulnerable in our communities. And so it's just sort of part of our culture. It's what we believe. And it turns out that the purpose that we came up before the 2 viruses that we faced, to use your words, turned out to be very appropriate at this time, and we're very happy, and I think our employees have really embraced it.
Well, Fran, we did a little work together, really supporting the magnificent work that Cisco is doing in the community, and around the $50 million 5-year donation to Destination Homes, and the housing complex that's supporting. And part of what you did when you were doing the communication, building on the things that inclusive for all future that Chuck just lined out, is you talked about this stakeholder view. And so could you let our audience know about the Cisco view in terms of the stakeholders and all the groups that you want working with you, and hopefully to move forward together?
Happy to, and it's great to be with you. We feel that we have an accountability to the communities around the globe. And I think something that inspires us all of the time is that we believe this so strongly as a company, but every day we see our employees out there and they are impacting students around the globe. They're helping those that don't have as much. They're showing up in ways that I think inspire all of us. What's been so fascinating for us is that as we bring our customers and partners together, what we can see is that they want to have impact. And we realize that together we're so much stronger. Something that's been amazing, Michael, we've had this goal now for a few years, which was to see 80% of our employees actually participating in the communities. And we just hit that goal. And I'm not surprised, because I think the 2 pandemics that we're talking about, I think led us there, and I think was the call for us to do more. But more and more what I see, and I think you see this too, is that employees want to work at a company where they're proud of what they do, and they can talk about stakeholders in a very different way and feel like at the end of the day they're doing their part to make the world a better place.
And can you help the audience know, kind of the set of beliefs, and you call them the guiding principles, that enable Cisco to make decisions that probably an Excel spreadsheet wouldn't say you should make the decisions. But what can you say a little bit more to help our audience know about the guiding principles where you make these really tough decisions and these bets on the future?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to say about the guiding principles is they follow this bigger belief that we have, which is listening to our employees, and basically not just listening, but knowing that they should be creating a lot of these bodies of work. And so what's amazing about the principles is that they came out of hundreds of sessions that we had with employees. What's important to know about the principles is we not only ask what's great about Cisco, but what we need to improve and where we were perhaps not being our best. And listening and shaping that together with our employees landed us with 6 principles. What's fun about them is 3 start with give, 3 start with take. And it shows that there's this relationship and that it takes all of us to get there. There's maybe a few that I'll just share because we absolutely love them. Chuck's smiling, and I think we all know that one of our favorites is give your ego a day off. And what that is all about is we're in service of our customers, we're in service of our employees, and if we take ourselves out of it, we do amazing things together. Another one is take difference to heart, and that's really all about how do we drive proximity and curiosity about the different experiences that exist. How do we coalesce to really understand the difference that's out there? And so the principles are fun, they're fabulous, but the most important thing to say is that they come from our people.
Well, oh, go ahead, Chuck. Were you going to say something?
Well, I just love the simplicity of them. You know, we've really had a focus on trying to simplify how we communicate and our messages, and sometimes you can overthink and get things that are really super complicated. And I had a completely different version of give your ego a day off, but Fran wouldn't let us say it on the air, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay. I look forward to hearing that.
It starts with don't and fill in the blank.
I get it. That's awesome. So, Chuck, as you think about really the past 3 months and your customers, which are in some cases for Cisco, it's countries. So any proud moments, of what Cisco was able to do, for a customer to enable them to keep communicating and keeping themselves moving forward?
Yeah, it's been like 8 months now. If you really think it started in Asia, back late last year, and I think that the thing is that in times like this, your reaction to your customers it's sort of like the culture thing. I've said to our employees, whatever your culture was pre-COVID, it's amplified during this pandemic. So if it's great, you're gonna really realize how great it is. If it's terrible, you're going to realize how terrible it is. And I think that with our customers, your customer relationships and your commitment to your customers is the same way. It shows up exactly the same way. And our teams worked day and night for some couple of months in here for sure, all around the world, and they were focused on getting our customers up and running on this technology, getting their security footprint scaled so that you could support thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions and billions of people working from home around the world. We did it without regard for, we didn't say, well, send us a purchase order and we'll get over there and help you out. We just went and just got the technology out there and said, we'll figure it out later. And then we have customers obviously who are focused on liquidity, so they're trying to conserve capital. We put out a $2.5 billion credit facility to allow them to defer most of the payments until 2021 if they had urgent needs. And then the teams that were building out, our infrastructure for this platform, they worked 7/24 for probably a month solid, just to deal with the increased volumes, because these platforms were never designed for the entire world to be working from home, and so so there was just a ton of that, and then on a localized basis, we had teams in countries around the world delivering these video units that we're using today. We had them all sitting in our offices all around the world, and they weren't being used, and we had healthcare institutions that could use them to do intake of patients over video as opposed to being exposed potentially to the virus. And our teams all around the world took these machines, cleaned them. They delivered them to everything from nursing homes so that people could communicate with the patients because they couldn't get in, to hospital systems all around the world so they could do that remote intake, delivered them to prisons so people could visit. It's just been phenomenal to see what our employees have done. So those are just some examples, Michael, of what we've been up to.
Those are great examples, especially think about your people and what they were going through personally. And they dealt with that and were of service to each other and to the customers. And your point about how you go into, a time of high uncertainty and challenge, you're going to be greater, which the data is absolutely supporting that, including we have CEOs who have called us, over the past 4 or 5 months saying, well, we kind of came into this with a low trust culture. What can we do now? And I'm like, good luck. It's time for prayer and incense. There's not much you can do in this world right now. So you are rewarded for doing that. And going into the pandemic, kind of pre-COVID, if you look at Cisco, these numbers make a difference for you, the listening audience, in terms of people saying you can take time off when you need it. Cisco, it's 96% of the employees said yes, you can. And that's compared to the next best company in the world, which is 88%. People are paid fairly here. At Cisco, it's 83% compared to 75% for the next best company in the world. And that this is an emotionally, physically, and psychologically safe place to work. At Cisco, it's 87%, and it's 79% for the next best company that we work with in the world. So that margin is impressive, and that's why Cisco's performing the way that they are right now. And in terms of Cisco, the company that you're both describing, you've both been very vocal, as have other leaders at Cisco, about the social injustice, inequality, and issues of systemic racism based on the recent events in this nation. And I'd say, Chuck, want to hear from you on this one. What is it that has got you so fired up and clear that this is a place to take a stand? And what have you done? That's question one. And question two is, what have you done personally to learn more so that you can be more effective in leading the change?
Those are great questions. First of all, this is not a new thing for me. I sit on the board of the Ford Foundation, and so social justice is front and center in what I believe. I feel like it. First of all, everything that we've seen, the George Floyd death, I mean, these they're just wrong. It's just wrong. And so sometimes when things are so binary, it's and not everybody believes it's binary, and I get that. But for me and for our company, it's binary. And we just decided this is an issue that we're going to take a stand on. And I've actually said, if you really don't believe it, then you probably don't belong here, because it's wrong. And so many of my peers are in the same way of thinking. The weekend after George Floyd's death, we were all on the phone with each other saying, now's the time. And you have these opportunities in life where there is a moment that you have to seize, and you have to be willing to take the action, because you may not get it again for a while. And historically, the problem has been that we've forgotten these things too quickly. And so I think our job is to not let these be forgotten until we get to a better place. What have I done to personally do it? I'm fortunate that I have some real great mentors in this arena. Darren Walker with the Ford Foundation has, I've learned so much from him. Brian Stevenson, Equal Justice Initiative, is a very good friend. Last year I had a good friend of mine who is a white woman married to a black man that we're very close to, and she told me last September September 2019, we were at an event, and she told me I should read this book called White Fragility, and I'd never heard of it. And I read it, and I told Fran about it, and I started telling my whole team about it. And so spending time I've gone to Alabama with Brian and toured and gone through his facilities there, and obviously read his book, and he's on the board of the Ford Foundation as well. And so, his whole notion of getting proximate has been a guiding principle for us. And the last thing I'll say, and then Fran can maybe give a little more color on this, but we had started work in 2019 to better understand the experience of our black employee base. And we've been focused on gender for the last decade, and we finally feel like we broke through and we're making progress on that. And so we wanted to really understand the experience and leveraging the whole lessons we've learned around being proximate to an issue to better understand it. We did this fishbowl exercise, and Fran's participated in a lot of them, and they've happened in lots of organizations. But we did one in early January, right, Fran?
Yeah, that's right.
And we had 18 very good African American Black leaders in our company that sat and had a moderator who led them through a discussion, frankly, about what it's like to work at Cisco. And me and my entire leadership team sat around that circle and we listened. And I think it was 2 hours, 2 and 3 hours, Fran, we did that?
3 hours, yeah.
3 hours. And then afterwards, we all shared our thoughts back after hearing this. And I would say 90% of my team, as they spoke, had tears in their eyes. And look, it wasn't all terrible. There was some good stuff too, but it was just to hear the experience led us to, we then, after I served them wine following that, we kicked off a 100-day sprint, and we started attacking all the areas. And Fran has been such a great partner and leader on this. This has been her leadership that has gotten us here. But we had a bit of a head start so that we weren't caught flat-footed inside the company, and that has helped a great deal. And the last thing I'll say is that the weekend right after George Floyd's murder, I reached out to Darren and Brian, and I asked them if they'd be willing to join me on all hands inside our company to talk about what had transpired. And those two guys are fantastic. On Monday morning, we had a special weekly check-in for all of our employees, and I had Darren and Brian on there, and they just did an amazing job. And we hit it hard. We hit the issues really hard, and so I think that's sort of where we are on this thing and how we're trying to respond. And then there's a whole set of efforts that we're pushing as a group of CEOs through the Business Roundtable as well. But Fran, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I'll just have maybe a few thoughts. I think the first is our employees are looking, I think, at all companies to say, is this real? And the only way that you show it's real is by really talking about that which is not working. In that session, we had this moment in the meeting where there was a set of employees that were saying, I don't think there's any racism here at Cisco. And I was watching the chat. I've never seen anything, so people were commenting. And I remember responding to that and saying, of course there's racism at Cisco. Of course there is. And when you have it in your community, you have it in your company. And so I think there's, one, you have to acknowledge, and you have to say things that I think all of your training would tell you never to say. And you have to speak when you don't have all of the answers. I think, Chuck, one thing that I remember is that up front in that meeting, you just said, listen, I may not get this right, but please understand my intention. And I ask for your forgiveness if I say something that's not right. We're learning. And I think that's really important as well. I guess the only other thing that I would say, because a lot of the folks that are listening may also be people practitioners. Right now at Cisco, something we're doing is that the executive leadership team is going through inclusion coaching. And what that coaching does is it helps you to understand, how are you stepping into this issue? What proximity do you have? How do you think about privilege? What does that look like? And I'm learning a ton. I'm learning a ton. And the most important thing to say is that staying proximate is hard work. And I think that's something we all have to sign up for.
Well, first of all, I'll also give a plug to the book, White Fragility, that Chuck talked about. And I'm not getting any royalties. And for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with it, it's written by Robin DiAngelo, a white woman. And she says in the book, I'm writing this for white people. but I read it, and I think it gives us a different perspective on racism, and helps us describe really just, it's like air, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So and if I say that and you haven't read the book, you're like, golly, what is he saying? Well, if you read the book, if you're willing to lean in, I think that you'll understand it, and then it also provides an understanding of racism that we can do something about it. This
Yeah.
is this belief. I'm optimistic. The old views of hatred and one crazy pathological person hurting another, it's worse than that in terms of its impact. So we have to lean in and learn it. And about being proximate, Fran, your point about this is hard work. Some people would like to simply just go back to selling WebEx, but because it's more complicated to do that. But your organization has made the binary decision. I know one of the things that's going on, because we're certainly dealing with it a lot, is in terms of communication. I think both of you, if you could help our audience, meaning just say a little more about the difficulties of talking about these complex emotional subjects, and you've got 77,000 people to have an intimate conversation with. What are things you can pass on to those who are listening to really be vulnerable and be open and try and be as inclusive while people are going to make mistakes along the way?
Yeah, I'll start, Michael. First of all, I highly recommend White Fragility, and I'll also highly recommend How to Be an Anti-Racist. I read that recently, and I may go back and read. There you go.
I would read White Fragility first, though.
You should read it first. Absolutely. I agree. I'm thinking about reading it again now, because in the context of everything that happened, I have to assume it'll even resonate more and give me real time, application. But look, on the communication front, I think in general, today's world requires leaders who communicate frequently, who communicate simply, honestly, openly, and authentically. And this is, it's like so different than where we were a decade ago, because all of our employees are looking for a different experience in the workplace than they used to. And this whole notion of work and life is so blended that they want to know people, and particularly the executive teams, they want to know you as a human being. Right? The days of, I joked with our employees early on in this thing. My father would go, he would put on his suit and become work dad, and then he would come home and he'd become home dad. And that doesn't exist anymore. It's just work, everything, you got. If you're working and your child has a soccer game at 3, you go to that. You have dinner. You're working. You have a call with Asia at 9:00 at night. I mean, that's just the reality of what we all deal with, and we need to recognize that. So that's the first piece. The second piece on this particular topic, or anything that's super complicated like this, what we have done is, first of all, we've made very clear statements that there is no place for racism inside Cisco, period. We've made that clear. And then I think the point that Fran made earlier, when you don't understand the issue completely, if you're not an expert on the issue, but you need to engage because it's important for you because of the role you play to engage in the issue, that's why I was compelled to apologize up front. Because what White Fragility is all about is why white people struggle to talk about racism. And there's a whole notion of we don't understand. And in some cases, people have good intentions, but they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Or they don't know, or is that going to offend somebody? And the reality is that, our black employees, they want to have the discussion, and they'll actually help educate us. And so my whole notion of just saying, look, forgive me up front, but know that this is coming from the heart, and we want to engage, and we want to understand, and we want to fix whatever problems we have. And I think what I would tell people is approach it like you would any sort of issue like that outside of work. You would be very honest. You would be very open. You would say how you feel respectfully and in an attempt to learn. And I just think it's really important. And I've always said on issues where you don't know, just say up front that I'm not an expert. and then people will give you grace, right? Anyway, Fran?
Yeah, I would just add, and maybe I'll get to some of the stickier elements, because I think everyone struggles with that a little bit. From day one, Chuck, we created frameworks to guide us, and they were never perfect, but they allowed us to explain why we were going to engage in conversation. And I laugh a little bit because I think 5 years ago, our frameworks, that was our start. They were different, and then I think we mature and we learn. But what we had to do, and I think all companies struggle with this, when we had the first conversation, there was a ton of emotion. And it almost feels like you open up Pandora's box as it relates to racism, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. It's incredibly emotional. The risk right now is that it has no place in this dialogue, but the dialogue about racism has become political. And I think we're so much better than that. I think you can just say, hey, the political thing, it's there. Don't worry, it's always there. This racism dialogue, like put all of that to the side. But after the first dialogue, there were a few comments in the chat that we consider inappropriate. And what we decided to do in the follow-up meeting was to bring this workplace color spectrum that we have to the discussion so that we could explain why we felt like something was inappropriate. And so the way that it works is you have green, yellow, orange, and red comments. And a green comment is you're respectful, you're productive, you're inviting dialogue. Green comments can be comments where you don't agree, but the way that you're talking about it is such that you're really engaging. When you get to orange, you get to a disrespectful comment. When you get to red, it's pretty toxic and disruptive. And so what we did was I actually read some of the comments from the previous meeting and talked about where they showed up on that spectrum. And our hope was that we could just learn how to navigate through this. But I think that's the hard part for all of us as companies, is navigating the emotional response to the dialogue as well.
I like the spectrum. I think that's awesome because people need some guidance. They need examples, and they need to know that the organization understands how difficult it is and is providing some support, in terms of the spectrum of guidelines. And then plus, the vulnerability of Chuck saying, kind of forgive me in advance for going into this uncharted territory, as a person and as a CEO, and trying to create that safety for all. One of the things we know is even at the world's best company, it's like we've talked about this, the three of us, of how world's best, and yet you both feel like you got a long way to go, and both are true. Both are true. They're not in opposition to each other. And one of the things that you have at Cisco, other organizations do too. Great companies have ERGs or employee belonging groups. They have some way of providing an opportunity for people to come together, and most of them volunteer when they come together to really feel less alone, and also to try and help their company and to try and support each other. So if you could let the audience know kind of where your ERGs are now. You have a powerful network of them. And as you look at the months, ahead, how you're going to do two things. One is support them to have more impact on the organization. And two is to make sure what sometimes happens when a recession requires restructuring, that some of their members don't disproportionately feel impact, as typically, Black employees and Black women have felt more of the impact through restructurings. So big question, but if you could, I'd say I'll throw this to you first, Fran, and then Chuck, if you could add in as well.
Yeah, so the first thing that I would say is that we met with our employee resource groups, it was about a month ago, the entire executive leadership team, and we wanted to just hear from them. And, maybe Chuck can talk a little bit about some of what we heard. Michael, we're moving in the opposite direction. We're trying to put more momentum behind our employee resource groups. We think there's a ton of power in bringing them together. And because of all of the intersectionality, we can see the shared experiences. And I think in doing so, we hope to get to a place where everyone feels like they truly belong. Something that we did a little differently at the beginning of the year was we moved the employee resource groups into the part of my organization that manages the executive leadership team. And so what I'm trying to do is really connect the employee resource groups to the day-to-day business. And actually now bringing the resources to them where I handle them like any other function of the company. So any other function in the company, they have a business partner, we're doing talent reviews, we're really focused on what they need to develop. And so as opposed to looking at them now as something that is a great group that sits on the periphery, I'm trying to bring them into the center. And also starting to change some of the way in which we talk about our Cisco employees from a community perspective, because I think that will drive us to, again, having tremendous impact and making it real every day. Chuck?
Yeah, it was a great discussion we had. We decided we were going to build an ongoing cadence. And again, it was my entire leadership team and the leaders of each of our employee resource groups. And the one thing that stood, all of them talked about how they felt and how their colleagues felt they were representing. But the one thing that really stood out to me is that they wanted the group holistically to be represented. They actually, there's so much focus on our Black employees right now, and the leaders of our Black employee resource groups are saying, hey, wait, we want this to be for all, right? We want it for us, but we want it for all of these groups, and that was really it was very cool to see them do that, because it's very easy to be, hey, look over here, we got our issues that we need you to help us fix, and the thing we agreed we were going to do out of there is try to get, and it's already there's a lot of this is already in place, but I asked my leadership team for each of the ERGs to be sponsored by one of my direct reports. And then as I said that, they started rattling off where it's already in place. And so, like most of my great decisions, someone's already executing on them before I come up with them. But it's really powerful. I want to comment on the one thing, Michael, that you were talking about earlier. On the discussion inside the company, one of the issues we all have, is that we choose our news sources and we choose in our social media and all the things, and we all know this, I'm not going to tell you anything new, is we spend more time having our views reinforced by all of those sources, right? As humans, I think that's just natural for all of us. And I've really been trying to encourage our employees, because what I'll tell them is the reason you think differently is because of your diverse backgrounds, and the value of diverse backgrounds is that you bring different perspectives. And we've tried to just, on issues where there's disagreement or people that don't, see eye to eye, we have tried to encourage them. I've asked them, find someone who believes exactly the opposite of what you believe and have lunch with them and understand why they think, and try to learn something, and try to understand it as opposed to criticize it. And the reality is that people don't understand why you feel the way you feel. They don't understand your experience. They don't understand how you're raised. They don't understand your religious beliefs or whatever it is that's driving you to believe what you believe. And that's the hardest thing, is to get people to do that, particularly on highly emotional issues. It's very difficult.
Yeah. But that's where the difference is going to be made. If people are willing to do that. Question what they believe, for me to question what I believe, and to be willing to learn more. Every so often I'll turn to a news network that I don't particularly like, just to see what's happening, and just to learn what the thinking is. But
my wife does the same thing, and I'm like, what? Like, I just want to hear what they have to say and make sure I'm not missing something and hear a different perspective.
I absolutely do. Now, maybe I have to take a walk afterwards, but at least I get some information and I'm a little bit more informed.
Hey, good. It leads you to exercise. That's
It
perfect.
does. It does. So that improves my well-being. So let's we're gonna invite Julian Lute back in to tee up some questions that have come from the audience.
Great.
Great conversation so far. Extremely insightful. I'm over here getting motivated. Took a lot of notes. Appreciate the vulnerability. A couple of things that folks are talking about, and it kind of aligns up with our research, is we know that mid-level managers and frontline managers are critical, right, to this effort for employees getting the information they need, especially during times like this. How do you make sure that mid-level managers get that information, that clarity and that support that they need to engage the people that report into them?
Well, I'll make a couple comments and I'll let Fran talk about how we're doing it operationally. But this is not a new issue. This is the number one issue on executing anything or doing anything as a company, is getting the mid-level and the front lines, whatever strategy, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. How do you get that done? And we've done a lot of specific education for those leaders. And I mean, I get on videos with them and tell them what we want them to do. But one of the things we've done is we've done this weekly check-in since this thing started in early March. So I get to speak directly to employees. There is no filter, and we're doing it every week. And now we've gone to every other week because things, we felt like it was a good time to do so. But I think it's education. And then it's broad-based communication. And when the employees hear what our expectations are of their managers, they can hold them more accountable. So Fran, this is something you and I've talked about for 5 years.
Yeah, it's so funny to that last point. There are some things that have really evolved just in the last few months. And so against the backdrop of COVID, I think one of the realizations that we've had is that we're even more reliant on our leaders. Because at this moment, what we need more than anything else is to understand where every single person is at and what they need. And we all know this, but our people have a very heavy load. They're worried about their families. They may have illness in their family. They're perhaps having some financial issues based on everything that's going on. And so what's interesting is that you need your leaders at this moment more than any other time to be there, to demonstrate flexibility. And what was happening in the first few check-ins was Chuck would put a big statement out there about family comes first, take care of your families. It's okay, like if you have to step away. And our employees on chat would say, I don't think my manager is hearing this. And so it created this really important moment to the point that I think, Chuck, we kind of got tired of hearing ourselves talk about this in the check-ins.
We did.
What we've done since, we have something called a team health check. And in the month of March, we did over 200 of these. And basically what that means is we send a coach into a team environment. And they just talk about what's going on. They talk about trust. They get to know each other, kind of to Chuck's point earlier, at a human level, what's going on with you. And then they get into, hey, what are the team practices right now that will make us better? How do we communicate? How do we make decisions? And so we did about 200 of those. We're going to continue to ramp. Our goal is to get to 2,000 teams between now and the end of the calendar year. In addition to the check-ins where we are talking to our people, and something to share is that doing this from home is different. It feels so much more personal. We do have family members and pets that join the meetings, and I think it's humanizing, and we need that at the moment. But maybe the most important thing to share is you have to be clear with your expectations of leaders. And something that we're doing at the moment is we're focusing on the leaders who are not meeting those expectations, and we're trying to understand why and how we can help them. Maybe there's things that we have to do differently to meet them and get there, but I think we're going to continue to see focus on middle managers and the expectations, and we'll continue to invest in them, of course.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Let's see. Another topic that is getting, radio play all around the world is, we're going to get to a point eventually where people are trying to get back to some semblance of normal. Some folks are pushing it, some folks are delaying it. But we're wondering how is Cisco preparing for people and your customers to re-enter work in potentially the way we used to do things? Is that possible? How can you prepare your leaders to effectively lead through even this uncertainty, lead through these changes about even this sense of re-entry, people coming back to physical workplaces?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing we've been trying to get our leaders to think about is empathy right now. And it's, today you have, through this whole pandemic, you have all sorts of situations. You have people who feel isolated. They're home. They don't live with anyone else. They live by themselves, and they feel, and that's leading them to depression or anxiety. You got parents with small children, and I've tried to explain to the leaders that 3-year-old doesn't know what a 2:00 meeting is. Right? If they need their parent, they need their parent. You need to just let it happen and move the meeting. And some have parents, aging parents, that they're stressed. They're stressed about bringing the virus home to their parents and taking care of them. And I think, to your point, that when we get into the reentry, we're going to have a whole new set of issues that we're going to need to be empathetic about. We're going to have employees who are scared. And we have some probably who should be because they have immunodeficiencies. We have others who they just don't believe it's safe. And we have to respect that. And, it really is, we're doing all the things that every other company's doing as it relates to returning to the office. Early on in our weekly check-ins, I made the mistake of saying returning to work, and the chat window went nuts. It's like, we're working. So we made it return to office, not return to work. And you said it well, by the way. You said return to working like we used to. But I think this notion of really understanding the unique situation that each of our employees have. We got school in the fall, and all around the United States, there's going to be a different picture of whether kids are in schools or not. And so that affects what our employees are able to do. So there's not going to be one answer. I don't know, Fran, you have more to add, I'm sure, but.
I would just say it's a new world. I don't think we go back. And I think now the question is, what are the people practices that make us better? When I say we don't go back, I mean, we're going to see a percentage of our employees at some point back in offices. In some cases, as I talk to customers, they realize they're more effective and productive in the way that they're working. So I think we're going to see so many different hybrids in the way in which we work. I think the thing for us from a people perspective and leaders and organizations, we do have to figure out how we help our employees, because right now, I think many of us feel like we're sitting at our desks for 12 hours a day. And so what are those things that will allow us to recharge, to check out? Like maybe we start taking real lunches again as opposed to eating at our desks. And so I think these are some of the interesting things in front of us.
Thank you. Thank you for both of those perspectives. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Michael, for some final thoughts, and then I'll wrap us up.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. And Chuck and Fran, thanks for your time today. You deposited just phenomenal information. I'm sure, pens and keyboards have been clicking because you've talked about how to navigate through an unprecedented time and list of experiences as leaders. I actually gave a guest lecture yesterday to a class at the University of Minnesota of master's degree students getting master's degrees in human resource systems. And one of the questions from one of the students was, what can we do to elevate the role of HR? Because in some companies, it doesn't seem to be that important. And in some companies, and I talked about YouTube. I talked about you two. I said, well, look, tomorrow I'm going to be talking to two people who get it right. They are true partners that Fran helps run every aspect of Cisco in partnership with the CEO and her colleagues. That the transformation of that HR role, which you don't talk about very often, has been made at Cisco. And that's why Cisco is performing the way it is. Without HR being at the top, at the table, involved in everything, in partnership with the CEO and the rest of the team, then you're not going to have people be the most valuable asset. It's just not going to happen. You can't be people first. It's going to be people second. So I just applaud what you two have done, the way that you've created it, and it provides an example for others. I know people are clapping right now who are listening because they're in places where that transformation hasn't quite happened, but we certainly need it to happen. It's vital to becoming a great place to work for all. The other thing I just wanted to say is that in terms of being a great place to work for all, that there are times to focus on one group, one situation, one list of problems. Just like in a business, we have to focus on Asia. We have to focus on North America. There are times for priorities. This is one of those times, and it doesn't mean that you're not being a great place to work for all. So in the same way your ERGs, you're focusing on the Black employees, but you're focusing on everyone. And even they're saying we want to focus on everybody. There is a way of doing that, and there's no conflict in doing that. So respect you both. Thank you for the time and what you've given to others today. I respect you for what you've done, but I respect you even more for what you're trying to do, which is to create a great place to work for all and making it binary. You know, you're either kind of an anti-racist or you're not. And there's a belief at Cisco on what Cisco is going to create to make sure that you're doing things that are better for business, better for people, better for the world. I know your year ends tomorrow. I hope wish you tremendous success until tomorrow night.
Great. I can only echo Michael's comments. It was a wonderful conversation, you know, being able to listen in. I'm sure, as you said, Michael, people are clapping, taking notes, you know, computers are jostling, a lot of saves going on those computer files. But I want to thank you all. We know that one conversation is not enough. It's really going to take all of us sharing and learning together to find our way through. And we will find our way through to a more inclusive future for all. This series is one way that we're finding our way through. So join us again August 28th when we'll be joined in conversation by Tim Ryan, CEO of PwC. Check out the Better Together landing page at greatplacetowork.com to experience more of what we've been learning and hearing from folks. There are lots of resources that we think are valuable for both leaders and individual contributors alike. And of course, we want to know what you're doing. So if you want to share your experience or feedback or have additional questions, please send them to Michael_Bush at greatplacetowork.com. So on behalf of Great Place to Work, we want to thank Fran and Chuck for your time today and sharing your experiences with us all. And thank everyone who joined us because we know we are essentially better together. Thank you.
Thank you.